Hello class, and welcome to Notes 4.1, Integer Powers of 10. This is a pretty easy lesson. We are working with negative exponents and zero. We have a couple rules to keep in mind. First of all, negative exponents become a decimal number when in standard form. So whenever you see that negative exponent, it does not mean that your answer is negative. It actually means it's going to be a decimal. And our second rule is any number to the zero power is 1. And that one's kind of tricky because most people assume it's going to be 0. So make sure you write that down, highlight it, circle it, star it, whatever it is you need to do to make sure you remember it. Okay, let's try out some problems. First teacher example, write the power of 10 in standard form. So here we have 10 to the 5th power, which means, of course, 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. Now, 10s are easy to multiply. Instead of doing all this multiplication, all you have to do is count the zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Of course, that's the same as what our exponent is, which means I'm going to have 5 zeros in my answer. Okay, so remember, it's a way of kind of cheating. You don't have to do all the multiplication. You can just count up the zeros. Now, problem B is a little different. 10 to the negative third. There's two different ways of writing it. You do want to have your final answer as a decimal. For some people, it's easiest to turn into a fraction first. So when you see this negative in the exponent, that tells you the negative turns into 1 with a line under it. Okay, so 1 over 10 to the third. So if the directions simply said to change this power of 10 using only positive exponents, you would need to turn it into this. So I've gotten rid of my negative. However, since it says to write it in standard form, I do need to turn it into a decimal. So I know I'm going to have my 3 10s multiplied together, which means I have 3 zeros, 1 over 1,000, and then 1/1000th written as a decimal as a 1 in the thousandths place. Now, if you look carefully, you can actually skip all these steps in the middle because this has an exponent of 3 and it's negative. So that tells you there's going to be a decimal and we're going to have 3 zeros. So counting the zero rule still works, but what I want you to be careful of is notice one of the zeros is in front of the decimal. So we have 2 after the decimal and 1 in front. So 10 to the negative third is the same thing as 1/1000th as a fraction or 1/1000th as a decimal. So standard form does always want it in the decimal form. Okay, let's take a look at some other problems. Now we're doing the other way around. We've got them in decimal form, both of these numbers. They're in standard form, and we want to turn them into powers of 10. So again, the easiest way is just to count the zeros. In this problem here, I can see I've got 4 zeros, so I know I'm going to have an exponent of 4. Here, I need to count all the zeros. Remember, I need to count the 0 in front of the decimal as well. You may want to make a note to yourself to help you remember. So, counting the zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, I know I'm going to have 10 to the 8th power, but also I know my answer is a decimal. It starts out with a decimal point, so I know it's going to be a negative 8. Okay. Let's go ahead and go on to have you try some out. So, write the powers of 10 in standard form. So please write these out in standard form. Remember, if you see a negative sign, you know you should have a decimal point in your problem. Okay, welcome back. Let's take a look and see how you did. I should have 4 zeros and a decimal point. 1 in front, 3 behind. Here, I do not need a decimal point. I just need 6 zeros. And here, I also need 6 zeros, but watch out, I need that decimal point. So that does mean one of the zeros is in front of the decimal, the other 5 are behind. And then our last problem, we've got the standard form and we need to turn it into a power of 10. All I have to do is count my zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros, and a decimal. So that tells me it's 10 to the negative 5th. Okay. Now, this teacher example, I want to go over really quickly, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I do want you to see it. So here, the volume of a solution in a vial is about 1 millimeter. use the power of 10 to write this volume in liters. And notice this is kind of a science problem, and that's because exponent form is used a lot with science. Now, we're given the solution in a milliliter, and I need to turn it into a milliliter, or excuse me, just a liter. So I need to convert. And I'm sure you don't know the conversion yet, you will soon. But 1 milliliter to turn into a liter, a milliliter is about a thousandth of a liter. Okay, there are 1,000 milliliters in a liter. Okay, so I have that conversion now. So I'm going from 1 to 1/1000th. I need to turn that into a power of 10, 1 over 10 to the third. And then, I'm sure you already know, we've got that fraction form, that 1 with a line under it, that tells us that I can turn it into a decimal, or excuse me, into a scientific notation as a power of 10. And all I need to do is turn this 1 with a line under it into a negative. Okay, so 1 over 10 to the third is the same thing as 10 to the negative third. And then, of course, since it's a word problem, I need words in my answer. And there you go. Okay, let's take a look at the next teacher example. Which list of numbers are ordered from least to greatest? Now, in order to be able to solve these, I need to have all the numbers in the same form. So I either need them all as a power of 10 or all in standard form. Doesn't matter which way you do it, but they need to be the same. So here, I can write them all in standard form. 10 to the negative fourth and 10 to the third are the two that I need to change. Okay. Here, I can compare the numbers now. So I have 10 to the negative fourth is the smallest decimal. 100th was already in decimal form, so I plug it in. Then comes 1, which again was already in decimal form or standard form. And then finally 10 to the third comes last. Now, notice I've compared the numbers in this order, but I always need to go back and change them into the original numbers and then find the letter that corresponds. So I've got my original numbers, which of course correspond to the answer C. Okay, last one, I want to look at why anything to the 0 power is 1. So if I'm writing these numbers in standard form, 10 to the third means 10 times 10 times 10, which would be 1,000. 10 to the second, 10 times 10 is 100. So notice if I take 1,000 divided by 10, I have 100. Now 10 to the first is going to be 10. So I have 100 divided by 10 and I get 10. So each time I'm dividing by 10. So 1,000 divided by 10 is 100, 100 divided by 10 is 10. So if I continue that, 10 divided by 10 is 1. It is not 0. So you want to be very careful with that. Anything to the 0 power is 1. And I could continue this dividing by 10 again to find 10 to the negative first, and I'd have 1/10. Dividing by 10 again, and I'd have 1/100th. Okay, and continuing on. So remember, each of these changes in power means you're dividing by the base. So let's go on to a student practice. We have 5 to the third, 5 to the second, 5 to the first, and 5 to the 0. With each step, now you're going to be dividing by 5. So go ahead and solve quickly. Press play when you're ready to see the answers. Okay, let's take a look at your answers. 5 to the third, 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. 5 to the second, 5 times 5 is 25. Notice I'm taking 125, dividing by 5, and getting 25. So already, without even doing any work, I know 25 divided by 5 is going to be 5. So my next step down would just be 5. And then 5 divided by 5 would, of course, be 1, not 0. Be very careful. So 5 to the 0 power is 1. Okay, great job. Let's go on to the quiz. Okay, take a look at the quiz. Make sure you go back through your notes if you need to, but make sure you do these 3 problems carefully, take your time, and go on to Schoology to submit your answers when you're finished. Have a great day.